What's up, guys? Muley Freak Aaron here, and I'm here with pro shooter and owner of Doughlas Archery, Kyle Doughlas. Welcome back, Kyle.
Thanks.
Today we're gonna go over my Mathews V3 27-inch bow build and what we're putting on it and why we're putting on it and how we're gonna squeeze every inch of accuracy out of this bow. I know you shoot with a longer axle-to-axle bow and you hunt with one as well. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so they're just gonna be kind of different animals. So the shorter you go on a bow, the string angles are gonna change. You're gonna get usually a little bit different speeds out of them. And just kind of the overall feel of the bow is gonna be different. Typically a shorter bow is gonna be just a little bit more finicky when you're aiming. The string angle is gonna be just a little bit farther away from your nose when you're trying to touch your nose to anchor on the string. Typically you'll be a little bit faster with the short axle bow, and it's more compact and maneuverable. So I see a ton of guys that are wanting like a small, lightweight, compact bow for especially like ground blinds or maybe tree stands and stuff like that. They usually like to run the shorter bows just because it's easier for them.
Yeah, and I've been shooting a short bow for 4 years now. I had the Triax and I shot the shorter VXR, and I liked it because it goes on your pack nicely. We hunt off of horses. It's nice not to catch those branches as you're going under. It's lightweight. You know, again, it sits on your pack nice. You're not catching stuff. So that's why I like it. But I know there's advantages, right, to shooting longer bows.
Yeah, so typically a longer bow is just gonna be a little bit more forgiving. They're a little bit smoother to aim. I like to run a little bit longer bow, and I just kind of sacrifice the maneuverability and packability of it. It's a longer bow, it's heavier, it sucks to pack, and stuff like that. But for me, that's something that I just take into account when I pick a bow. Yep, so I pick my bow off accuracy rather than off of maneuverability, and a lot of guys kind of will choose to, you're gonna have to compromise one way or the other. So it just kind of depends on your hunting style and what you're looking to get out of your bow.
So what can we do to make this shorter axle-to-axle bow shoot better? What are some things we can do to kind of offset that?
Just different things. I mean, we can play with stabilizer weights and different configurations of stabilizers on it. We need to make sure that your anchor point and your peep is really solid on it, and making sure that you're going to be able to get to a good anchor on your bow.
Let's get this shorter bow to shoot really good. That's why I took it to Kyle. Doughlas Archery, Weaver County Archery Range.
We can definitely make shoot.
So the goal today is to get all the components on it, then we're going to paper tune it. So first, we got the rest. Kyle, tell me about the Hamskea Trinity rest. Like, why would a hunter want to use this on their bow?
So to me, that's the best rest on the market, mostly because it's built super durable. It's a really well-made rest, and it's a limb-driven rest rather than the cable-driven rest. A lot of guys are running cable-drivens. You see a ton of like Q80s and ripcords and all kinds of different cable-driven rests. The benefit of a limb-driven is just going to be consistency. So on a cable-driven rest, you're going to tie the activation cord of the rest through your cable. When you draw back, the cable will pull the rest up. When you shoot, there's an internal spring in the rest that will pull it down out of the way. A limb driven is going to run opposite. So your cord is going to tie from your rest down to your bottom limb. So then when you draw back, the internal spring will pull the rest up. But when you shoot, it's actually your limb that's pulling your launcher out of the way of the arrow.
Okay.
So it's just going to be a lot more consistent on the drop. And you can kind of tune and tweak the timing on it a lot easier than you can on a cable-driven rest, which is really nice.
Okay.
And kinda,
so the difference is that internal spring? Is that?
The internal spring is wound backwards, but the main difference is going to be the activation cord is going to be tied to the limb rather than to the cable.
Gotcha.
So when you get your Hamskea, you're going to have several different things in the package with it. If you look here, you're going to have, you know, your rest, of course. It'll come with your bolt here to mount that to your riser. It's going to come with a knobby limb pad. It's going to come with this little arrow holder, a felt pad, and then a reverse wound spring. So the spring, this will be able to allow you can change the rest to be either a cable-driven rest or a limb-driven rest on these Hamskeas. So if you want to run it as a cable-driven, you're going to swap this spring inside of the rest here. The felt here is just going to quiet down your launcher on your rest. So if you're drawn back and you have a little bit of noise that's bugging you, stick the felt on there and that'll quiet down your arrow dragging back across your rest as you draw back. Your little arrow holder here will just stick on the front of your riser just to keep that arrow kind of sitting in place when you're not moving around. And then your knobby limb pad here, that's how we're going to attach the limb cord to your limb and make sure that it doesn't slide around and move around. You always want to back out the set screw enough to make sure that's not sticking through the back of the rest here. That won't let it mount all the way up flush against the bow if that screw's sticking out. So we're going to mount this on here.
You said the Hamskys are just built sturdier.
Oh yeah, they're built like a tank.
So would you say that they're maybe the con of a Hamsky is they're a little heavier than other rests, or not even?
They are a little bit heavier, but to me, it's not enough to even matter, really.
Yeah.
I have no downsides on these rests for me. I love these things. I would never put anything else on. Let me get this started. So when we're bolting the rest on here, there's two things to pay attention to. We're going to pay attention to where the rest is situated forward and backwards on the boat, and we also want to pay attention to the angle that it's mounted at. We want it to be sitting flat or square against the riser. We don't want this rest to be tilted way down or way up. It won't really affect anything a whole lot, but it's nice just to have that squared off. Front and back position, that's kind of somewhat of a personal preference. And it can vary from bow to bow. Main thing you would do adjusting that is going to be either to make it fit on the bow. For some of these with the cable rod or something is in the way, you're kind of limited on where you can put that. Otherwise, you can adjust what they call torque tune with that. You can slide your rest forward and backwards, and that will slightly adjust the torque tune in accordance with where your sight is positioned forward and backwards on the bow. We'll just kind of start in a general position here, and really you can mostly eyeball them fairly straight. If you really want to get super critical, you can put a level here on the shelf and then a level here on the rest.
So Kyle, he's a humble guy, old Kyle here, but he's been shooting lights out at his tournaments lately. So drop a line, say congrats, tell him to keep it up. He's too humble to say anything, but this guy, he's been shooting lights out. Don't show all his checks up there, Peyton. No. We don't want anyone grabbing the numbers off of those. So
around the set screw to the riser here, these the new Hamskys have a new set screw hole here for the Mathews, so you can run that in. That'll make sure that the rest has a lot harder time coming loose and it won't slide around on there for you. So where we attach this cord to with the limb pad down here on the bottom limb is going to change the timing on the rest. So if I move the cord farther forward on the limb, that's going to make the rest start to drop sooner. The reason we want to adjust that is we want the arrow rest to start dropping about midway through the letdown. So if we draw the bow back and when we start letting it down, once it's about halfway down, the rest should just barely start to drop at that point. Usually that's going to give you the most clearance out of your vanes, and it's going to give you a little bit of leeway one way or another. If something stretches or moves on your bow, you've got a little bit of room for error. If it drops a little sooner or a little later, it's not going to screw anything up. If we drop it too soon, it's not going to fully stabilize the arrow before the rest starts to drop, and it's going to cause inconsistency issues. And if we drop it too late, we're going to get fletching contact coming out of the bow. So we want to make sure that that's set up perfectly, and then we won't ever have any issues with it ever again. I'm just going to kind of pick a spot to start here, and then we will check it once we start tuning. And if it's not where we want it, we'll peel this and re-stick it where it needs to go. So I'm tying the rest cord on here. I like to tie it on just like you would with a D-loop. A lot of guys will tie like a loop in here and run it around and through the loop. I don't like to do that. I like to tie it and cinch it down real tight. With these Trinities, I don't like to have a ton of slack up here, so I tend to tie the cord fairly snug down here, and then we'll use this Easy Glide here to adjust the rest setting. If you leave too much slack in your cord here, when you go to tighten it, this Easy Glide's gonna slide way down there.
The other good thing about Kyle setting your bow up is he sets it up with love. It's like the difference between your mama's chocolate chip cookies and some stranger's chocolate chip cookies. So there's a big difference. Mama's chocolate chip cookies are always better. Same thing with Kyle. He sets it up with love. And it makes a big difference when you're out in the field getting ready to shoot something. So
and before I tighten this down, I'm gonna go through here and set the center shot and set the height, and then we'll adjust the timing cord.
Yeah. So basically, to get the tension right on that, we're just sliding this.
Yeah. So this is what they call the Easy Glide on here. So this little O-ring will slide off, and then all you have to do is just slide this down. And that would tension the rest there, and then slide the O-ring back up over.
Okay.
So, but we're going to leave it loose for now until we get it set up. Okay, so we're going to set the D-loop now. We're probably going to start with the arrow running either level through the burger hole or slightly nock high through the burger hole. You don't really need to level the arrow. A lot of guys will stick a level on their string and a level on their arrow. I've kind of went away from that because as soon as you start paper tuning, all that goes out the window. So just get it close to start with, just eyeball level or just slightly nock high. And then once we start shooting it through paper, that will tell us where it actually needs to be. So that's kind of how we're going to determine where we put the nock point. As far as the D-loop goes, it's not critical, but I do like to tie them on a certain way, just for guys shooting a handheld especially, so that it's gonna kind of torque the string a little bit less. So on a left-handed bow like this, I'm gonna start with the top knot on the D-loop over here on the right-hand side of the bow and the bottom knot on the left-hand side of the bow. That way, if somebody's shooting a handheld release, it's gonna twist the D-loop this way here, and it's not going to want to torque the string as bad as if we had these backwards and they're trying to go opposite. A little something that I like to do. I'm not sure how big of a difference it actually makes, but it does torque the string a little bit less here. So I'm going to tie the top knot on there.
Wait, Kyle, so is it true that left-handed shooters are better, more accurate?
Well, that depends on the shooter.
I just kind of figured lefties were bestie. So you set up a lot of bows, Kyle.
Yep.
Do you ever feel like, does it ever get boring to you or like mundane? Or do you enjoy setting up every single bow?
No, I really like it actually. I mean, every now and then when I've got a ton of them stacked up and I'm just cranking them out, I get a little bored sometimes, but usually it's not too bad because every bow kind of has its own personality, and I try and get the most out of every bow. So it's kind of like its own challenge, every bow that I set up and work on, because they're all a little bit different. Yeah. So it's pretty fun. I really enjoy working on bows a lot. A lot of times you'll hear people, it kind of ruins archery for them once they start working in a bow shop because they work on everybody's bow all day long and then they don't want to go home and work on theirs or shoot theirs. And I'm kind of the opposite. I'm like trying to get everything done here in the shop so that I can go do my stuff. Yeah. So
I can already tell this bow has a Michael Jordan personality, killer mindset. I can already feel it. So that's good. That's good that they have different personalities. This thing's gonna draw some blood.
Okay, so I'm gonna tie a nock set onto here. I usually just tie a bottom nock set on there. That's gonna do several things for you. First thing it's gonna do is it's gonna get rid of nock pinch. So your arrow's not going to be wanting to kind of float up off of your rest as you're drawing back and stuff. The other thing it's going to do is just kind of make sure that your D-loop position is locked in. It's not going to be able to slide up or down the string. And if you need to change out your D-loop, you can do that and your nock set will still be in the same spot. So it's not going to throw everything all sorts out of whack.
Have you ever had a nock fell on you?
Like
while hunting? Yeah.
Not while hunting, no, but just while shooting, yeah. And if your nock is cracked and you don't know it, and you still shoot it, sometimes it can actually act like a dry fire coming out of your bow and blow your bow up. So you need to be really careful with that. If you shoot a tight group, always check your nocks for cracks before you go and shoot them. And I usually replace my nocks fairly regularly too. Depending on how much I'm shooting, it may be once a month, it may be once every 3 months or so.
Oh, really? Okay.
I do like to change them out, yeah, because once they have been on there for a while, they just kind of start to wear down a little bit.
It's worth it.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fresh nocks are nice.
And there's a lot of, constant pressure right on that, small little area, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because every time they pop on and off the string, they're expanding and contracting, and the plastic is going to move, and it has a fatigue life on there. They're not going to last forever. So anytime I put a lighter to anything on the string, I always make sure that that's the highest point on the string here. So I'm going to rotate these so the little tag ends are straight up. If you're burning something, say down here, and you have the lighter too close here, the flame will actually come up and burn your string there. So you need to be super careful anytime you have a lighter near a bowstring. Next thing we're going to do is set the center shot on the bow here. Typically, I'm going to run them, fairly centered down the bow by lining up the string through the middle of the back of the bow. Usually a little bit outside of center. A lot of times on a Mathews, we'll measure and start like from the riser to the center of the arrow. 13/16 is a pretty good starting point, like we did on Eric's bow. But that's not kind of like the be-all, end-all center shot here. That you can play with that and adjust it to where it shoots the best or where it tunes at. So we'll kind of get it set where we're going to start with, and then we'll use the top hats to tune it with, and then we'll fine-tune with the rest, just bumping it slightly left or right if we have to once we're close with the top hats on the paper tune there. So a little pro tip here, any rest that has micro adjust, a lot of times guys will get a little bit of a buzz when they're shooting their bow and they'll bring it to me and can't figure out what it is. These little micro adjust knobs here, even though the bolt here is tight, that can still move just a teeny bit one way or the other just because there's a little bit of slop in there. So if you just tighten it against one side, then it won't buzz on you and you're not gonna get all those little noises going on. Now that we've got the nocking point set, we've got the center shot set, we're gonna go ahead and tighten down the rest cord here. One thing I like to do before I tighten them down is I'll kind of grab a hold of them and pre-stretch them in the best I can. These cords do have a little bit of stretch, so we may need to kind of go back and retighten that after it's been shot for a while. But typically, if you just kind of grab them and pull on them as hard as you can, that'll get a lot of the stretch out of it to start with. So when I'm pulling this down, all I'm doing is I'm pulling it until the rest is fully down, and then adding just a little bit of tension past that. So what I'm looking for is I don't want any slop in the rest here. When you touch the top of your rest, it should be held all the way down tight, but you don't want a ton of tension to keep in there. So I've got just a little bit extra slop in there. Tighten that down just a little bit more. And that's about what we're looking for right there. And we can adjust this tension slightly to change the timing on the rest a little bit. You don't want to go too tight on here, otherwise the rest won't come all the way up. And your spring here, if you put tons of tension on it, it's going to wear out faster than it needs to. So now we'll go ahead and check the timing before we move on to anything else. When we're setting the timing here on your bow, what I'm looking for is I want your cable stops here on top and bottom cam to contact your cable at the same time. Okay. So basically your cams are rolling over at the same time. If they hit different, you're just going to get a really spongy wall and the bow's not going to be very forgiving for you. It's not going to want to shoot super well.
So would you tell, I mean, all your customers when they come in to get their bow set up, do you say go shoot it, you know, go get 150 reps through it, and then we probably need to bring it back and redo it just because everything is stretching and moving? Or would you say once you get a good first paper tune and tune after that, it's pretty well good to go?
That's just going to depend on the strings, really.
Okay.
A really good set of strings, once we set it up, I'll usually set the timing before I tune it, and we'll shoot it a handful of times, tuning it and setting the peep and whatnot. And then once we're done, I'll double check the timing. And usually it's still set good. If it's off a little bit, I'll tweak it a little bit. And then for the most part, they're really good. I'll usually have them bring it in after they've shot it a couple hundred shots, and we'll just double check and make sure nothing's moved.
Gotcha.
On a set of strings that's not a super good set of strings, yeah, they definitely can move. And after a couple hundred shots, it may be off and need to adjust it and stuff.
Okay.
That's really the determining factor on how well your timing stays set is your string quality and the stretch in those. So we'll drop back here and check your timing. Okay, so you can see here, we've got the bottom cam is contacting here, and the top cam is still, say an 1/8 inch or so out. There's two ways to adjust it here. I can either put a twist into this cable here, or I can take a twist out of the top cable. Both of those are going to do the same thing as far as cam rotation goes. Just going to go ahead and add a twist here. Probably a half a twist. Well, I'll try a full. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so we got the rest on. Now we have the sight. I'm using the HHA Tetra, same sight I had on my VXR last year. It is a 4-pin. So Kyle, there's a lot of discussion in the hunting industry whether you should shoot a single pin or have multiple pins while hunting. So what is your take on that? What do you shoot? And just in general, what's your take on it?
Totally personal preference. To me, you would shoot different things depending on what you're wanting to get out of your bow. A single pin is definitely going to be the most accurate just because it's a cleaner sight picture, there's less going on, and you dial to the exact distance. There's no gapping pins or guessing or anything like that. You dial to the distance, put your pin dead center, and shoot. The downside to that is it's a little bit slower in a hunting situation where you have to dial no matter what distance your animal's at. A multi-pin sight is going to be a little bit less precise, but it's going to be quicker in a hunting situation. So it's kind of a trade-off, whether you want to just range and then gap your pins and shoot, or whether you want to dial to the distance. You know, once you get past your pins, basically a multi-pin is going to turn into a single pin once you start sliding it, because you're always going to be aiming with the same pin. But it's really a personal preference on whether you're looking for the most pinpoint accuracy you can get, or whether you're looking for a little bit more speed in a hunting setup.
Gotcha. So yeah, I mean, if a buck or bull's coming in hot, right? I mean, you can't just you can't range a million times and hope to, you know, get it right, which I guess that's where we're
where
talking
the multi-pin
about.
will help. Yeah, and on a single pin, you can, you know, there's a little bit of a way around it. You can, a lot of guys will set their sight, you know, for about 30 yards or so, and then you know where to hold it, say 20 yards or 35 yards or so. So you've got a little bit of variance, but then you're still going back to gapping and kind of guessing where if you had a multi-pin, you'd have pins for those. So it really just depends on your setup and what you like to run.
Gotcha.
So,
all right, let's get her on.
For your sight mounting holes here, we can put it in any one of those that we want to. So if we put it in these first ones here, it's going to move the sight farther in on the bow. That's going to make the pin gap tighten up a little bit, and you'll get a little bit more distance out of your sight before your fletchings contact the bottom of it. The farther out you move it, you'll get a little bit more gap in between your pins, so you can see in between them a little bit easier, but you're going to lose just a little bit of distance on your max distance before your vanes contact your housing here. And that will slightly affect the torque tune that I was talking about earlier, but we're not going to worry about that today. We're just going to set it where we want to do it. Okay, we're going close.
Close.
We'll settle in. That way you can get the most distance out of it before you run out of range.
Yeah, you know what? I think last year it was set to these last ones, and I had troubles with it the whole time, trying to get it right.
And it won't change it a ton. I mean, you may get 5 more yards or something, but I figure why not?
Why not?
It will change. Changing these holes actually will adjust the way your sight housing looks in your Peep too. The closer you bring it in, your sight will look a little bigger in your Peep. The farther you move it out, your sight will look a little smaller. So you can kind of play with that as well. Use the Hamsky level here and level up his sight. The sight's going to have a second and third axis on there, so we're going to make sure that's sitting level for him. So when we're setting third axis, you've got to do that at full draw because it's going to take into account all the torques and everything on the bow. So the cable rod loading up, the weight of your sight and stabilizers and all kinds of things like that. So we'll do that at full draw. I'm going to draw the bow back, make sure these 2 dots here on the alignment pin on the Hamsky level are going to be level on my line here on the wall. I've drawn this with a level to make sure that's perfectly vertical. I'm going to level up these 2 dots and then check that against the bubble in the sight and adjust that. Once I draw the bow back, the level bubble inside the Hamsky here no longer works anymore because of the way third axis is. So third axis basically is going to be this way on the bow here, which is opposite of what a lot of people think. But what happens is, say your sight's totally cockeyed on the bow like this, you'll never know on flat ground because whatever way the bow's pointed, it's always going to read level. But say your sight's cockeyed like this and then you go downhill, well now your bubble's going to run to the uphill side and give you a false reading. So you're going to tilt your bow to adjust and you're going to miss left or right when you're aiming up and downhill.
Okay.
So basically third axis will make sure that the bubble tracks straight all the way up and downhill. So it's super critical for especially Western hunting or even Eastern, like out of a tree stand and stuff. It's going to make a difference. It's already good.
Good?
Yep.
Sweet.
We lucked out.
Okay, so the quiver I'm going to use this year is the Mathews Q Light. Super light. It's also a 2-piece, which you like the 2-piece quivers because it kind of gives you more variance in space in between your other components, right? On
the Mathews quivers, yeah. So the single-piece Mathews, the hood and the grippers are so close together, you've got a lot of arrow hanging out here on your bow with nothing grabbing it. Where their 2-piece one is you're gonna have a lot more distance between your hood and your gripper. So your arrows just tend to stay in there a little bit tighter and a little bit better, in my opinion. We're gonna go ahead and shoot this bow through paper now. I'm gonna be shooting it just for the initial tune and getting it close. And then Aaron's gonna come in and we'll have him shoot it at the end just to double check and make sure that the bow is tuned to him. And we wanna make sure this bow is shooting a good bullet hole with him shooting it. And that way we'll know everything's tuned up and ready to go. Oh boy.
We off?
Yep, we'll get her. Let's see, that one was a low left tear. So I'm gonna start with the up and down. I'm gonna adjust the knock point here.
So last time
move that up for a low tear. You can either move the knock point up or the rest down on a low tear, and those will kind of give you the same effect. Right. Getting closer. I'm gonna move that knock point up a little more even.
So basically, once you know you have it pretty close over there, then you can use the top hat to kind of get it to exactly where you want? Or?
Top hat is more what I use for like more of a course adjustment, and then I'll fine tune everything with just barely moving the rest.
Okay.
So the top hat, basically that's just what Mathews calls the shims in their cams. And they've got different thicknesses of them and stuff. So we can either flop sides on them if they need to move one way or the other, and we've got a thicker one on one side and a thinner one on the other side. Or we can change thicknesses to move the cam different amounts.
Okay. Another pro tip for you, when shooting a compound, make sure you use a leather archery classic glove.
What's the benefit?
It helps you grab your release better.
There we go. Finally. Starting out on this bow, move the nock point up and down to get the up and down set. So we're shooting a little bit of a low tear, so I moved the nock point up, and that took care of the low tear. And then it still was throwing a little bit of a left tear, so we changed out the top hats and shimmed the cams both a little bit to the left, top and bottom. And then that brought it back to center, so we've got a bullet hole now. So now we're going to go ahead and let Aaron shoot it and make sure that it's doing the same thing when he's shooting it.
All right, so we got the sight on, we got the rest on, we got the quiver on. Kyle made sure that it was paper tuned. Took a little bit of adjusting, but he got it done. So that's why you got to take it to someone that knows what they're doing. Because if you're trying, if someone doesn't know what they're doing, it's easy not to get it right. So it takes a little time to get it right. Now I'm going to shoot it, make sure it's doing the same thing. I'm going to use the Carter Quickie wrist release. Basically, I'm too scared to shoot a back tension or a thumb release just because all I've shot, for the last 5 years is a wrist release. So that's what I'm going to stick with, especially since I have a hunt here in a few weeks. So again, the Carter Quickie, what's the advantage of, or why do you like the Carter wrist releases?
On a wrist strap release, you're just looking for one that's got a really good trigger that's going to have a clean release. A lot of the lower end ones aren't going to have a very crisp trigger. They're going to be like a dual style caliper that's going to get heavier on the trigger with a heavier poundage bow. So you want one that's got a good sear on the inside, that's got a good trigger. And usually either a hook style release or a single jaw caliper is going to be the best, just because the D-loop is going to come off of the release cleaner and just makes for a good smooth release.
Yeah, I have a back tension. I'm going to practice with that just, so I become a better shooter, become more consistent. But for now, I'm going to stick with a wrist strap release, especially with the hunt right around the corner. Yep. So they take time.
Yeah, it will take you a while to learn a back tension. So let's switch this over to lefty.
Lefty. I am lefty, so we're going to just switch this around really easy. Just do a little swoopity swoop. Lefties are pure shooters. I mean, that's what science says. So that's good for me.
When you draw back, you want to be able to get your finger all the way up and over, hooked over the trigger. Okay. That's going to make you be less punchy on the trigger, and you're going to be able to hook the release and just pull it rather than trying to slap it with the end of your finger. That's going to make you shoot a lot more consistent and not want to jerk the trigger near as bad.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure my last one, I was just barely getting maybe the middle of the tip of my finger over. So
yeah, that'll make you a lot more consistent. So when it's not drawn back, typically your release is going to hit about the end of your palm here. And then when you draw back, that'll make it so that it can just go, you can hook all the way over the trigger and point your finger to the ground, not just reaching out for your trigger. And then on the wrist strap, make sure you always go in the same hole. Once you figure out what you like on there, make sure it goes the same hole every time.
So it's my turn to shoot. Just make sure that it's doing everything that it was doing for Kyle.
Yep, so hook your finger all the way over the trigger. Yep, and then just slowly squeeze it. Okay, so you've got a little bit of hand torque going here. There's two things we can do. We can either adjust your grip to where you're not torquing the bow so bad, or we can tune the bow to that grip.
I need to fix it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll work on your grip a little bit. Different shooters sometimes have a little bit different grip. That's why I like to tune it to the shooter. But sometimes if you're torquing it really bad, it's better to fix your grip rather than adjust the bow to a bad grip.
Okay.
That's better.
All right, so I just shot through the paper. I have a slight right tear, but that's because of my grip. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a lot of reps with a correct grip, and then when I've shot my bow a bunch, stretch out the strings a little bit, I'll bring it back and we'll see if my grip's improved. But again, for now, we're just gonna keep it as is. We're gonna get the Peep in right now, and we're almost done.
Yeah, there you go, just like that. Okay, so is the Peep gonna be too high or too low right there?
Looks money.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maybe slightly too low.
Slightly too low. Okay, we can move up a little bit. Why don't you go ahead and let it down? We'll move it up just a little bit. This time I'm gonna have you do it with your eyes closed.
Okay.
So when you just anchor and touch your nose with your eyes closed, and then when you open your eyes, your peep sight should be perfectly centered on your sight ring there. That way it makes sure you're not influencing where you're anchoring to try and see through your peep.
That looks good.
Looks money?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll get that tied in. And you should be all set from there.
Okay. Awesome.
I tie in the Hamsky peeps a little bit different than you'll see most peeps tied in, just because where they're a little bit longer tube on the peep here. I like to have serving in between the string material and the peep tubing itself just to protect it. So you'll see when I'm done, it'll look a little different, but it's rock solid. It can't move, and then it's got extra protection in there for your string.
Cool.
So
what do you like about those Hamsky Raptor peeps? Like, why do people like them so much? I know they're popular.
Yeah, so what's different about these, they're going to have a longer tube on them, and they've also got light baffles on the inside of there. The reason those are going to help you is because the light will come through the peep more consistently in different lighting conditions. So if you have the sun like at your back versus at your face, or if you're shooting like from light into shade, or you're getting low light conditions and stuff, just the light coming through your peep is going to be more consistent in all those situations. You won't have no glare in there or nothing.
Okay. Yeah, you're seeing a lot less of just the small rings that you used to see a lot of. There's like a little more, at least these Raptors have that, you know, like you said, that longer tubing, and it's a lot nicer to look through.
Yeah, it makes for a clearer sight picture when the lighting comes through there so consistently. And your peep always looks super clear. It doesn't look super fuzzy or anything on you. It's always like a dark, clear peep. They're super nice. I would never run anything else in my bow but a Hamsky peep. There's no way. So one extra little thing I like to do on these Trinities with the Easy Glide, once we get it set where we want it, I'll usually take a little bit of serving and run it just on these two cords here and serve those together so that it can't ever move. If this got bumped or something here, it would still be impossible for the cord to move. If you end up having to adjust it, you do have to cut this off and redo it though, but it's just kind of another way to bulletproof it.
That's cool. All right, so we got the Mathews V3 27-inch all set up. She's paper tuned, all the components on her, and it's time for me to shoot her, get her broken in, and then we'll be ready to go. Got to hunt with her here in a couple weeks. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment, like the video, subscribe. Thanks, guys.